This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Leave it to Charles Busch to take the greatest tragedy in the history of the American theater and make it into a comedy. So we're so happy to have him here along with his leading lady, and here to introduce them, my leading man, Michael RIEDEL of the New York Post.
Charles, how do you feel about Susan's introduction there? The assassination of Lincoln is sort of tangentially, I should say, well, connected to your new play.
Very much so.
Our leading lady at the Manhattan Theater.
Sort of the central. You know,
why is he knocking me down? That's the point.
Yeah.
But you
well,
made
I guess it'd be
comedy.
worse if you said that that my comedy was a tragedy.
No, I didn't say that at all. But we'd say that Mr. Lincoln's death was a tragedy.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
But the play, though, is not about the death of Mr. Lincoln. The play is about Laura Keene. The actress played brilliantly by Kate Mulgrew.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And who was Laura Keene?
Laura Keene was a great actress manager of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. In fact, the first of her kind, and quite extraordinary in that she did manage her own theaters in New York and elsewhere. And it is true that this episode in her life eclipsed what could have been a brilliant career. Yeah. And I say it in that beautiful line you give me. The future, if my theatrical memorabilia is ever displayed, it will only be thought of as having belonged to the actress who was on stage the night Abraham Lincoln was shot.
Because the one subject in school that interested me was history, and so I always used to read about anything to do with Lincoln and Lincoln assassination, and then of course the connection to the theater because he was assassinated in the theater, and the name Laura Keene was always the footnote
That's
of
right,
just sort of the actress who was on stage that night, and I just was kind of always fascinated by who was Laura Keene and how did this affect her and what did she do afterwards, or how did she respond to this big moment, and finally it really was after 9/11 actually when I was responding to it in my own totally self-centered, self-absorbed way to
only you would respond to 9/11.
Well, only he would admit to it. But
well, only I will admit to it because here I'm living downtown, in fact, and yet my first play was on Broadway, The Tale of the Eldridge's Wife, and all the theaters are closed. Yeah. And of course, I was just hysterical. What's going to happen?
Me, right?
I had a hit, and how is this going to affect me? But then I did think really seriously that in a way our self-absorption is kind of our key to our survival. Getting on with your life and all the things, just even though you're living through history.
When you're talking about theater people.
Theater. I'm talking about everybody.
All of us,
just all of us.
In this play,
you're involved in history. You collide into history, and yet at the same time, you do have your everyday, your relationships that are still ongoing, and your business, and So that kind of inspired the play.
It's very interesting you say that though about the attack on the World Trade Center. Not to make light of it now, but I mean, you get the sense watching you in this play. There's no, of course, idea that this momentous event is going to happen. You're just trying to get that show up, and you're, you're just driving those actors in the crazy way that you drive them, in a very funny way. You're just taking charge of everything. That's who you are, and then all of a sudden, this event is going to change the history of America.
Well, that's why it's so delicious and complicated.
But there's a wonderful nuance, and is this true, that Lincoln decided he wasn't going to come that night, and Laura Keene
didn't want to go to the theater, and I did send him a note.
Yeah.
Mrs. Lincoln pressed him as well.
Yeah.
But had my note not arrived, and indeed it was found on his person when he died.
Wow.
Really?
Had it not arrived, I think that they would have gone elsewhere.
So she pressured him, you better show up.
Yeah.
She was an admirer of Laura Keene. Yeah.
It's really the examination of this kind of a moment in a woman's life who's theretofore been so myopic in her thinking. Laura Keene was completely self-absorbed. And what did this in fact do to her? And it shows the resilience, I think. It shows a grace note, a depth, and also the wonderful way that comedy saves us. It's a Valentine to the theater, but it's also an examination of the kind of people we are in the theater.
How closely have you stayed to the actual story? I mean, seems to have done an enormous amount of research for this play.
Well, it's an odd thing, because I'm not a research kind of person. I really have phobias about going into libraries and those awful librarians who are so nice to other people, but they smell, fear when I walk in. And thank God for Google, But anyway, I
get your card catalog and you break out in hives.
They're so mean to me. Librarians are just.
Why are they mean to you, Charles?
I don't know why. And I read, whenever I intentionally, whenever I read a biography, I look in the acknowledgments, and and I thank the wonderful
Librarians
from the Lincoln Center. And I go, but when I walk in, it's like, yeah, you might as well be in Duane Reade.
Oh, they're very nice over there at Lincoln Center.
I don't
You
know.
just don't like the musty smell.
I've never heard any.
And libraries are
I've never heard
complicated.
anyone who's afraid of a librarian before.
Never.
All my life. No, they're so mean to me.
Oh, well.
Do you think they're suspicious of you? What do they think you're going to look up?
Because you don't bring the books back, Charles. That's
You don't return, Charles.
So you did it on Google, all this
And,
research?
no, I read books, and I really
you read
did.
books,
I really, but on eBay I could buy the books. That's the thing. So
With your earnings from The Tale of the Allergist Wife.
now, Susan, are you making advances?
And do go on.
That's Susan, you're too much.
But how closely?
Anyways, yeah, that's the point. Say your question.
How closely did you stick to the actual events? I mean, is this?
Yes. Well, I did all this research, and then I was paralyzed because I just didn't know how to somehow take all this research and turn it into a linear plot. And I put it away for a while, and then I came back to it and thought, I'm just going to write this as a fictional piece, and who cares if it bears any resemblance to the truth. And then surprisingly, I think just by osmosis, so many facts came in, and when I reread the play, I thought, most of this really is quite true. I invented basically the relationships within the company and those other actors, but the young understudy did go on that night. Some of the wackier things that you would be sure that I would have made up actually are the historic fact.
One of the things I love the most about this play is you really informed me about that whole culture of the theater at that time, of these touring companies and the kind of people who were actors at that time.
And how austere it was. That's what Charles has taught me. They were austere. They were Spartan. They were practical people.
Yeah.
I mean, these troops knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I always thought it would be, I thought it would be far more glamorous.
No, this was not
Of course, we're talking
glamorous.
directly
Yeah.
after the war. But that element of it.
Yeah.
That
Well, I find what's interesting too about your character is, the whole idea of a director is a 20th century concept.
That's
There were
right,
no directors before; they were actor managers, and you have those wonderful bits. In the beginning, I remember you come out and you say, "Now, if you'll just sort of like stand over here when I come out to give my speech," that's
Let alone
the
a
Titanic
lady.
ego they had.
Yeah, woman. Yeah.
And that is, in fact, what she fought. And that was her great triumph, was it not, until the assassination? Laura Keane stood alone. Her gender did, among managers of that. Can you imagine? We're talking about the mid-19th century.
And she came from nothing. Wasn't she a servant from
I'm
England?
going to plead the fifth.
No, I mean,
Why?
Why did you make that up?
Who called for this? Well,
Why do you
because
plead
a certain license was taken,
all right.
but it was theatrical, it was very effective. And what else did you want to ask me about my religious...
Mrs. Colombo, that was amazing.
wonderful.
Well, I did take liberties, and she was from somewhat humble beginnings, but I brought her down to the gutter, as many of my heroines, my sort of proletarian heroines, so I think I exaggerated a bit, but she did work in a pub at a point. No? Yes?
But didn't we all? Now, Charles, what made you think to bring in the fabulous Kate Mulgrew and not do this part yourself?
Oh gosh, I thought about it certainly, but there's a big part of the play is the relationship between Laura and her dresser, female dresser, and there's a wonderful intimacy between these two women when they're so. Laura Keane is so sort of stripped of her affectations and illusions about herself, and these two women are so honest with each other, and I really did think that had to be two women playing it, because no matter how real I may play it, there's still going to be a separation between actor and role.
Right.
So I thought that was important, and then of course when when the heavens brought Kate Mulgrew into our lives, it was so fantastic that I wasn't at all.
Oh, no.
All jealous.
Lucky me.
Because it's something you do with the performance I found really quite brilliant. From
Be
the moment.
specific and take your time.
Yes, I don't want to give. I'm afraid it's almost like a Walter Kerr review where he would isolate something an actress does and then she could never do it again.
I know,
but I'm going to do it anyway.
I know.
From the moment you come on, you're always in motion. I mean, you just kind of are bobbing around like that. You never stop.
It's a sweet little train.
Yes, exactly. There's never any stillness with her. She's just sliding in and out and moving around and jumping in that part of the set. And it's a kind of a remarkable physical
ambition is
thing that you're
constantly
doing.
moving, isn't it?
And it's something you decide deliberately to do. I'm going to make
and
this
more
statement.
and more so. It's driven. It's driven. I've got to get this done. Everybody's got to get me this person, that person. Yes, it is a motor, which then becomes very still in Act Two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Laura Keene really was, from what I read, just that one of these women who are sort of, or one of these people who are kind of overachiever. She started a fine arts magazine. She, was creating, it was very ahead of her time. She had a lot of failures too, because she was kind of overambitious. But she tried to create a central booking system for touring companies all over the country.
Really?
That
She was a Schubert before there were Schuberts.
Yes, she was trying to do what the Schuberts later did, and failed at it. But this constant motion, I think, really would be very accurate to the kind of lady she is, just so energized.
Yeah. What happened to her, ultimately?
She died of tuberculosis.
9 years later.
9 years later.
Yeah.
Broken?
Yeah.
Well,
No, she herself would never say that
Yes.
she was broken.
she was indomitable.
She died
Yeah.
in a beautiful house that her husband had bought for her on the river. Her love and her daughters were at her side. And I think that she felt that she lived a very complete life with the sorrow of Lincoln's
Yeah, I
death.
mean, I do believe that her reputation was tarnished.
It was.
But that certainly wouldn't stop a person like that.
I think this plays very interesting in your work, Charles, because I mean, you're thought of as a comic writer. Tale of the Allergist's Wife in the great tradition of this Neil Simon Broadway comedies. This is a very funny play, but it's a lot more poignant, I think, than some of the past things of yours I've seen. Is that a fair?
Yes. Well, I think it's certainly the most extended dramatic scenes that I've written before, but I felt it sort of had to be. When this lady who's so myopic and self-absorbed, and then finds herself in the midst of this terrible tragedy that's not only affecting the whole country, but devastates her. I didn't think she could just start doing cartwheels in the next scene.
No.
I thought you'd have to have her respond.
And he bled out on her dress, and they
beautiful.
still
Yeah,
auction that off.
Yeah.
And it's highly educational, and so it should be licensed by theater companies all over America.
And we can next look forward to your long day's journey tonight. Right now that you're getting a more serious mode of writing.
Yes. My intention is to write a completely humorless play, devoid of any humor.
Oh, is there anything in it for me, darling?
Yes, I do. Except the first 3 hours will be in ancient Yiddish.
This is a scene right out of Our Lady, you two. All right, it's a great play at the Manhattan Theater Club, running until.
We don't know.
We don't know. Extended.
Undetermined.
forever.
Extended. Yes.
Great performance by Kate Mulgrew as Laura Keene, and very fine play by Charles Busch. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you for having us.
Great
Thank
fun.
you, Susan.
Thank you.
So last week, the multi-million-dollar Pirate Queen opened on Broadway, and far be it from theater talk not to pile on. We have two of Broadway's finest critics with us, Michael Sommers of the Star Ledger and Jeremy McCarter of New York Magazine. So Jeremy, the Pirate Queen.
Breaking new ground for the musical theater?
Or
running
sort
ground.
of breaking ground downwards. It's finding new levels. I feel bad. We have to talk about this after everyone's written about it.
One does feel kind of bad about
Oh,
the whole
come
thing.
on. They put on a $60 million show. They're charging $175 a ticket to see it. I mean, what are you, critics or mice?
No, it's true. But we're still going to talk about it. That's why
Exactly.
that's why we're
I mean,
critics.
it's obviously the big fiasco, the big flop of the season. Where did they go wrong on this?
But my question is, what else did they think it was going to be?
Yeah, that's a
because
good
with the
question.
composers of Les Mis and the producers of Riverdance, it's exactly what you think it's going to be. It sounds like Les Mis and it looks like Riverdance. So who's surprised?
Now, you could argue, though, that, Michael, if it looks like Les Mis, which has only run about 20 years and made hundreds of millions of dollars, and sounds like, or looks like Riverdance and Les Mis, however you put it, these are gigantically popular entertainments. How come when you put them together, you get the Titanic?
they just don't mix. It's not. I don't think it's an inspired score by the team. Usually you can take away a tune or something, but there wasn't much going on there. It was sort of that skirling sort of. I guess he was trying for an Irish sort of a sound on the with the help of the orchestrators with those Uline pipes.
That means those magic
on.
pan flutes. That's
The Celine Dion moments,
Celine Dion
and it just didn't take. And it's just a terrible script. I mean, the script. Perhaps, it could have been an interesting story, these two women, but they don't meet till the end. She's going, Elizabeth's going crazy in England, badgering everybody.
And we should say this is about Grace O'Malley, who was a real adventurer, revolutionary in Ireland in the 16th century.
Right.
And she met at one point with Elizabeth I.
That's right.
And that is true. Yeah, that really
that's,
happened.
true.
That's true, and perhaps that could be something, but they don't meet towards the end. So, it's Oscar Hammerstein lived and died in vain with that sort of a libretto like that. It's just this old rote sort of thing with some really terrible lyrics too.
Yes, the lyrics were remarkably schematic.
Remarkably so, and just down. But I've already heard from readers this morning say, "Oh, how could you say something about this lovely family entertainment with great dancing and all that sort of stuff?"
Well, that's the thing. I mean, maybe they can get people in there to say. I mean, as you point out, Les Mis has been running for a tremendously long time, longer than I would have predicted.
Show, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, with these people who've had gargantuan successes and made a huge amount of money on these prior shows, that there's a deafness that develops that you can't say to them, this doesn't work. That there's nobody there to say, no, you really need to change that. That they're so sure of themselves because they made such a success on these prior things that they aren't malleable. They aren't receptive enough to criticism.
Well, it might be. But I think in this case, if I'm not mistaken, they did try to make
They
some
did, yeah, you're wrong.
changes.
They brought in Graziella Danielle, who came in to work on it, and they brought in Richard Maltby, who worked with Boublil and Schoenberg on Miss Saigon. Right. It is true that Boublil and Schoenberg are tough and egomaniacs, and my little sources there tell me that they didn't allow a lot of work to be done because they felt that their work was really quite good. And Graziella Danielle, in fact, she left. She went off to Pittsburgh a week before the show opened on Broadway because she had other.
So that I'm not absolutely wrong.
But they made an attempt, though. They made an attempt. The thing is, when you're in the thick of it, though, because you've never been in the theater, Susan. When you're in the thick of it,
bleeping you, Michael Riedel.
But don't you think this must happen, though? It's easy for us to sit on the sidelines and come in and to judge like that.
Well, it's
but
the
come
fresh
on,
eye.
you have been in the theater. If you're in the middle of it, you often don't. You lose sight of your way.
Can I just say, let's
He's
not
the
fight
voice
over
of
the pirate queen.
compassion. Thank you very much.
We're not fighting.
That's right, and
Let's
it's going to
make
be
it
going
about.
for a while. These people have deep pockets. They're going to get it at
The
least
people
through the
produce
summer
Riverdance,
to see if it catches on. So it's not going to be fade away anytime soon.
Blub, blub.
Glub too.
All right, now moving on to something on a little higher plane. The Year of Magical Thinking, Joan Didion's adaptation of her best-selling novel about the death of her husband, John Gregory Dunn, starring Vanessa Redgrave. Cultural elite event, Jeremy? Does it live up to its billing?
Well, no, I don't think. I think the bar it sets for itself is awfully high because of that. I mean, the big pieces in Arts and Leisure and every place else. But I think there's something. It's interesting to me why it doesn't play better than it does. The book, I think, the beauty of the book is that it's so intimate, and it's just you feel like you're right there with Didion as she's living through this grief. But when it's on stage and there are 1,000 people in the room, all of a sudden that becomes a huge liability. And I think that, I wasn't that moved by it, but seeing it on stage. And the more I thought about it, I thought that was it, because it's not the way that they tried to do it. I mean, a person sitting in a chair on stage can be hugely effective theater.
Sure.
Like we've all got memories of great shows like that. But I think there's just something about the language that didn't scale somehow.
Tone, too. I found it very cold. Vanessa Redgrave is a great artist. She looks like Cassandra come down from Olympus, or up from Troy or wherever Cassandra came from, to talk about this stuff. But it's interesting that this incredibly strong emotional actress is asked to do repression very much. The interesting thing about it is just watching her do this sort of thing. Occasionally the hand trembles and that sort of stuff. But it almost seems in a way contrary to use a natural resource like that to have it work like that. But it's a beautiful production, abstract, but it's so cold.
So are you saying that maybe Vanessa Redgrave's miscast in this?
Possibly.
I
It'd be
think she's
interesting.
miscast.
You do?
I think there's a quality to Vanessa Redgrave that sometimes serves her well on stage, but I think for something like this, you almost want to play. I mean, Didion is weirdly sort of distanced in the book. You don't actually learn. I mean, she keeps some reserve there, and I think Redgrave does the same. And I almost wonder how it would look if a much warmer actress had played this. If it maybe would
Smaller.
have canceled that out.
Diane
Smaller,
Weiss,
yes.
perhaps. Vanessa Redgrave is a great, great artist, and it's
Yeah.
a thrill to watch her. It's a great thing. But, you know, another thing about the text itself is that Joan Didion, through her work, has led an extremely privileged life. This is a woman who's able to take her child from one coast to the other on a private chartered ambulance. Sort of, how many, you know, women in America have the resources to do that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I felt it did seem a little rarefied when I was watching it. You know, that this really, if you live on Park Avenue or Fifth Avenue, but this might really hit you where you live.
You know,
it's
an
it's
elegant
privilege.
production. It's elegantly staged, I think, with those drops that fall away.
Directed by David Hare.
And, you know, until at the end it's this absolute void and there's nothing there. For me, it seemed the emptiness of her life. It can be interpreted other ways, too. But that's how that worked for me.
Yeah, I wonder if that occurred to anybody, how elitist it was on a certain level, that there was a certain limitation of the audience who were like, but you get that a lot in New York
I didn't
culture.
get taking the book out on stage. There's a moment where,
Yeah.
you know, she takes the book out, and I didn't understand what that was about. It sort of, you know, it seems to me that...
Well, they're selling the book at the back of the theater. So just
And bracelets, too. And bracelets,
cynical
too.
explanation. But,
Yeah, that's
but it seems to me the last thing you want to do is remind people that you're watching what is essentially an finely embroidered maybe, reading on stage.
Another show that just opened on Broadway, John Cantor and Fred Ebb's last show that they wrote together, one of the last shows they wrote together, Curtains, starring David Hyde Pierce, who I just thought was effortless and terrific, but mixed verdicts from you guys.
Right.
I'm a mix in variety. The variety say
go
you're
first on this
mix
one.
too. Oh, I think there's stuff to enjoy. I think you want to. You have to go to see the show wanting to enjoy it. I don't think it's top drawer. I think there's a lot of great stuff and some nice tunes, some wonderful performances. Edward, Deborah Monk. I mean, you know, there. But it, you know, with a murder mystery musical, that's a lot of exposition. You've got to wind it up. You've got to really wind it up. And there's that. And you know, the other thing is the show within the show. I didn't think was particularly interesting. This sort of Destry sort of show.
Yeah, it's spoofing
I almost
a
wonder,
Western show.
would it have been too much to pack in if somehow that plot had reflected what was going on off stage in that story? I don't know.
That would
might
require
be,
the cleverness of a critic, I think. Mike.
well, and we,
I mean, it tries awfully hard to be likable, though, don't you think? I mean,
yes.
it's not one of these rank,
tries
offensive,
hard to be
cynical.
likable. No. But I feel like yeah, that's exactly what it does. It tries hard to be likable, but I still didn't like it. And the more it tried to be likable, the less I found. I didn't, you know, lots of people have found it really amusing and funny. I didn't find it that funny. Lots of people have sort of bought into what it's trying to do. I didn't buy into it. I just think I've seen too many of these. I mean, another Broadway musical about Broadway musicals. Because now it's a murder mystery, but it's about Broadway musicals in the same way that like
Old Broadway musicals.
Spamalot is like, you know, Monty Python, and it's about Broadway musicals. And Martin Short's show, you know, is about Martin Short and about Broadway musicals. It's like the Broadway musical is about the Broadway musical anymore.
Well, that's because they
It's
can't
truly
write any.
decadent.
They
It's
can't
eating
write any
itself.
real Broadway musicals anymore. So now they have to write shows spoofing real Broadway
but
musicals.
that's what makes something like Spring Awakening
Fresh.
exciting, because it has nothing to do with this. And the style, I think, is part of it too, where the things that I've responded to the most in the last few years have been things like the John Doyle Sondheims and Spring Awakening and My Fair Lady at the Philharmonic, which was inexplicably great, I thought.
I heard.
And the Follies, which I guess is coming back.
Yeah,
There's an encore.
terrific
All of
play.
these things are not. I mean, maybe this is just my taste, but they all of them share the sense that it's just musicians and some actors, and there's no big sets, and it leaves it up to the audience to do the work. And to me, I think when a musical is again about the music, it's more satisfying somehow.
So what are you really looking forward to tell our viewers they should keep an eye out for?
Frost Nixon,
Yeah,
I'm very
excellent.
much looking forward to.
Frank
that's gonna be
Langella and
interesting.
Michael Sheen about Richard Nixon and
Indeed.
David Frost.
I suppose that's the top of the list.
Yeah.
I'm curious what they'll do with Love Music. at
Love
Manhattan
Music,
Theater
that's
Club.
the Kurt Weill.
Kurt Weill songs, and Michael Service and Donna Murphy.
can't wait.
My friend
Wow.
Donna Murphy.
That's right.
Yeah, you know that, and of course, Deuce with, you know, the hometown girl, Marion Seldes, and
Yes.
visiting royalty back, Angela Lansbury. Can't wait to see them volleying stuff back and forth. Although I gather they're retired, so you're not actually going to see the girls playing tennis. It's in the past there. But I can't wait. What great prose! I walked by a rehearsal the other day, and Michael Mulhern, who's in it, came through, and he says it's just like going to seeing great master acting classes to watch these women rehearse. Yeah. So when somebody like that says that, that something special is really going on. So I can't wait.
We're looking forward to all those things. I just want to say that if you read The New Yorker this week, their description of Frost Nixon